Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Donald Trump makes history today as the first U.S. president to go to criminal trial. Jury selection begins in Manhattan on charges of campaign finance fraud. Trump faces some 34 charges related to undisclosed payments he made to an adult film star who alleged an affair during Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Those payments were not claimed as a campaign contribution or expense, according to prosecutors. Trump spoke outside the courtroom this morning, blasting the prosecution.
This is political persecution. This is a persecution like never before. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
Trump's former attorney Michael Cohen served federal prison time related to the case. Israel's war cabinet is debating its next response after Iran launched its first ever direct strike on the country, sending hundreds of drones and missiles and giving advance warning of the strikes that enabled Israel and its allies to shoot down the vast majority of them, including the U.S., the UK, France, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. Pacifica's Glenn Reeder reports.
Iran said it sent the wave of attacks in retaliation for Israel's bombing of the Iranian embassy in Damascus 2 weeks ago, killing 7 of its military leaders. The United Nations convened an emergency session to discuss the conflict. UN Chief Antonio Guterres.
It's time to step back from the brink. It's vital to avoid any action that could lead to major military confrontations on multiple fronts in the Middle East. Civilians are already bearing the brunt and paying the highest price. And we have a shared responsibility to actively engage all parties concerned to prevent further escalation.
U.S. President Joe Biden told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu the U.S. would not participate in any retaliation of Iran and urged Israel to consider the situation a win. Biden plans to convene a meeting of the Group of 7 to coordinate a united diplomatic response.
That's Glenn Reeder reporting. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he'll bring an Israeli funding bill for a floor vote this week. The Israeli military renewed warnings for Palestinians in Gaza today not to return to the embattled north after opening fire on returning Palestinians walking north this weekend, killing 5. This as the north is experiencing a famine and the south is bracing for an Israeli land invasion into Rafah. In the West Bank, Israeli settlers and forces raided at least 2 Palestinian towns, setting homes and cars on fire and shooting a 17-year-old teenager, Omar Ahmed Abdullani Hamed, in the head, according to Defense of Children. The organization said the 17-year-old was shot by Israeli settlers, and that Israeli forces and settlers have killed 35 Palestinian children in the West Bank, including 2 U.S. citizens so far this year. 116 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since October 7th. It's an International Day of Action against the war in Gaza. Activists and trade unionists are vowing to shut down ports and weapons manufacturers around the globe. Activists in Australia were arrested for blocking entrances to Elbit, an Israeli defense manufacturer. Actions targeting Elbit's offices also took place in the UK. Ports were blocked in Barcelona, Ireland, and actions are underway in Oakland, California. Actions are also taking place in Long Beach, Portland, Seattle, New York, Philadelphia, and other major U.S. cities. Sudan's civil war marks 1 year today as fighting between the military and paramilitary rapid support forces rages on, and the country faces a calamity of starvation with a potential mass death in the coming months. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres spoke remotely at a meeting of aid groups and Western leaders in Paris, urging more support for humanitarian aid.
A nightmare of destruction that has reduced homes, hospitals, schools, and other vital infrastructure to rubble. A nightmare of hunger and displacement. With over 8 million people fleeing their homes, we cannot let this nightmare slide from view.
He said the humanitarian campaign needs $2.7 billion this year to get food, health care, and other supplies to 24 million people in Sudan. So far, funders have given 5% of that. 3 survivors of torture at the infamous Abu Ghraib prison will be in a Virginia court today in a lawsuit against a private contractor that ran the Iraqi detention facility during the U.S. war there. The civil suit against CACI alleges the company supplied the interrogators who worked at the prison. The Virginia-based contractor denies any wrongdoing. And Pacifica Radio KPFA turned 75 years old today. The flagship station of the Pacifica Network is the first listener-supported radio station and network in the U.S., led by an anarcho-pacifist, conscientious war objector, and journalist Lou Hill. The mission was to create a new kind of radio supported by listeners, owing nothing to sponsors. That's a safe haven for creative expression and to highlight stories of war and peace, economic, racial, and social justice. KPFA Pacifica Radio has grown to 5 stations and hundreds of affiliates. It predates NPR, National Public Radio, by some 30 years. We thank you, the members who give to Pacifica, to make this continued work possible. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for Pacifica Radio.